Malta Besieged 1940-1942. This is a solitaire war game in a state of siege system. It is a system that some of us remember Victory Point Games used to publish, and now Worthington has picked up the system and produced several titles in the system. They have given us deluxe versions of Soviet Dawn or Keep Out the Fire, for example. And now we have Malta Besieged that receives the deluxe treatment. This is a solitaire war game about the siege of Malta in World War II, but not just that. It really is about the Mediterranean situation in World War II, with an emphasis on the sea, with an emphasis on North Africa, and again on Malta and on supply lines. So you, the player, will try to protect Malta from enemy pieces that will move on those tracks and will try to occupy Malta. But there is also a track here representing North Africa. The Italians start there with a game piece representing Reggio Esercito, and they'll try to reach Cairo, to Alexandria and then Cairo. Later in the game, the Italians will be replaced by Rommel, and when that happens, sono volatili per diabetici. If you don't know what that means, ask an Italian friend to explain that to you. And again, there will be tracks here converging towards Malta. We only have the Regia Aeronautica and Regia Marina on the board at the beginning. Later, the Luftwaffe will join, and they may have a combat value of 3 or 4 that will change throughout the game. The U-boats arrive, and they're also doing their thing. And so I'm just going to place them here to represent what may be a slightly more advanced state of the game than from what you have at the very beginning. We have, again, a track representing North Africa. The idea is that you want to push the Axis piece, whether German or Italian, as far as possible towards Tripoli, and then possibly out of the board entirely. If an enemy piece is in the highest box of the track, and there's a game effect that makes them retreat further, again, it's a game effect, you attack them, then they're removed from the game temporarily, they go to the holding box, and they may return later, of course, because that's what they do. We also have 3 important tracks here representing military, supply, and morale. Now, there are some States of Siege games in which you have multiple tracks, but they feel like they kind of all the same. You're just adjusting numerical markers. Here, I like that these tracks work in different ways because the military and morale have specific bonuses that you unlock if you're able to bring the token all the way up there, and you lose that bonus when that goes down. And then the specific penalties, again, for the military and the morale, if you are in the lowest possible box. The supply also has a penalty, the supply track a penalty if you're there at the very bottom. There isn't a bonus for the top box because anytime that the supply marker is between 1 and 5, you can choose to spend a supply point to get an extra action, so that this could be a way for you to bank future actions to spend in moments of dire need. Now, like other games in the system, the action will revolve around a deck of cards, and at the beginning of each turn you will draw a card that will give you a sense of what's happening at that time. You will have a number here indicating the number of actions that you have to perform, which you will see which enemy pieces advance on the track, adjustments to resources. Again, resources are the military, supply, and morale, and those can go up and down. And then modifiers that will apply to die rolls for that turn. Now, the deck can be set up in basically 2 ways. The historical game, in which the cards are placed with these numbers in ascending order, as you see right here. That means that the events in the game will mirror the exact sequence in which the events occurred historically. Or You can also shuffle these cards, but that's still the deck will retain some structure because the deck is divided into 3 epochs, as indicated by the different color on top here. You shuffle each epoch separately, so this one will still go on top, this one in the middle, this one at the bottom. Also, the card at the beginning of each epoch is fixed. So you can play exactly as it went historically, or with more variety and more unpredictability there. So you're trying to win in one of several possible ways. One way it will be a smashing success. I don't think that's going to be very easy to do. You remove all axis pieces from the board. Every enemy piece is removed from their track, and that's going to be pretty impressive. Most likely, your their chances of winning will be based on surviving until the end of the deck, and then the degree of victory will depend on the position of the rumble piece that will have joined the board by this point if you go through the entire deck. And of course, the further that piece is from Cairo, the better for you, the higher your degree of success. You lose the game if the axis reach Alexandria at the end of a turn, or if they're sitting on Alexandria at the end of a turn, or they reach Cairo at any given time. You lose the game if an axis piece manages to take control of Malta. You also lose the game if all of your resource tracks are a 0 at the same time. So, at the end of a turn. So, again, we were saying we're gonna draw a card, advance enemy pieces on the corresponding track. This card, for example, tells us to advance the Regia Aeronautica that way. Again, other adjustments, things that will happen, possible special events, and then we're going to use our actions. Again, in this case, there's only one. But the idea is that you will spend those actions to do different things, such as to attack enemy pieces, trying to push them back on their track. The core idea is the same as you have in other State of Siege games, which is everything you're trying to do requires you passing a test. Every test has a difficulty level represented by a number, and to pass a test you roll a die. You apply all possible modifiers, and if the final result is higher than the difficulty of the test, you pass and you succeed in doing whatever that is. So, for example, I can spend an action to attack the Regia Aeronautica. That means I roll a die, and after I apply modifiers, I need to roll higher than 2. There you go. So I spend an action, and as a reward for a successful attack, you simply push back the game piece that you attacked. And again, if they're at the end of a track, they go to the holding box. Other things that you can do, you can attempt to build fortifications if they are available, if the game gave them to you and placed them in the holding box. So then again, same thing. I need to roll higher than the value of the fortification, and then I receive that advantage. Now, moving into that space is harder for the enemies. Matter of fact, when the enemies are trying to move into an area that is fortified, they have to take the same kind of test that everybody has to take. The game is very equal that way, meaning roll a die, apply modifiers, they have to roll higher than the difficulty. Other things that you can do. Again, you can try to improve your military, your supply, and your morale. Same idea, roll the die and roll higher than the difficulty indicated on the resource that you're trying to gain. Now, as things will happen, more options will open up. The deck will unlock more things that may happen, and therefore things that you can do. For example, Ultra, if you play the historical game, Ultra enters play with card number 2, otherwise it may be later. Ultra, you can spend an action to buy Ultra, the Ultra token from the holding box and place it in that box there, and there may be other effects that make it committed, they make it unavailable, but the idea is that you can, once you have it there, use Ultra every turn. And Ultra is usually reliable, but you do have to roll a die. If you roll any result but 1, you can perform an Ultra action. If you roll a 1, then Ultra was unreliable and it goes back to the holding box and you have to buy it again spending an action. Ultra will allow you to get a bonus during a convoy battle. We'll see what that means. Also, super important, that's probably the one that you will want to use most often. If you use Ultra, and again, it doesn't backfire, you get to look at the next card in the deck, which is even more, I mean, later in the game you'll get a sense of who's coming next, but it's still pretty important. And of course, in the game where you shuffle the deck, even more important. But when you use Ultra, you get to look at the next card, and you get a modifier that you can place on a track that you can attack that turn. These modifiers are removed by the end of the game. By the end of the turn, I mean. Also, when Rommel arrives, the guy is just tough. When Rommel arrives, you're gonna have a token here representing Rommel's situation. These are modifiers that you apply on top of other modifiers whenever you're trying to attack the Africa core. These modifiers go this way, positive modifiers. Those are good for you because then, of course, with +1 or +2 it's easier to go above 4. And these are bad. These are bad. So, how do you get the upper hand against Rommel? By performing raids against his supply lines, against shipping lines across the Mediterranean. Which means once this piece becomes available, then you can perform the raid action. Again, it costs an action as usual, and you simply roll a die and you're trying to pass a test or defeat that number, so higher than that. If you perform a successful raid, then you get to move this token this way here. However, after you attack Rommel and you're successful, then he gets really mad. He's there using his like diabolical Desert Fox mind, and that when you successfully attack him, you have to move this token to the left by 1 space, making it harder to attack him. Again. And so maybe if you do another attack, that's when you wanna weaken his shipping lines, and then again repeat that. That's for the raid action. Then some cards will trigger a convoy action. That's basically a mini game that you resolve several times during the game. Every time a card is drawn that has this like red headline. How does that work? You will look at the enemy pieces on the tracks that are converging towards Malta. Remember, these are the ones that are active at sea, so these are the ones that are trying to destroy the convoys that are supplying Malta. So when that is the case, you will offset those game pieces a little bit to reveal little numbers that are printed at the bottom of the box. The rules say that you can also flip it this way as a reminder that now that's what you need to do, but I find that unnecessary. When there's a convoy battle, all that I need is to move them that way. Then I roll a die, and if for each of these pieces, basically each of these pieces are trying to attack the convoy. So I roll for the Regia Marina, and if I roll a number in that range between 4 and 6, that is a hit against the convoy. And I keep track of those hits using this track there. So for example, the Regia Marina has inflicted a hit on my convoy, and then simply I put it down that way, covering those numbers to indicate the Regia Aeronautica. That was Regia Marina that I gave you the example. I don't know, it doesn't matter. Then Regia Aeronautica, that is not within the range, so they do not inflict a hit. The U-boat are trying also to attack us, to attack the convoy, and they also do not score a hit. You may have noticed some of these have red numbers, so if the enemy rolls within that range, that's a critical hit. They will inflict 2 hits on the convoy. This is also where you can use your Ultra, and if you're successful, so if you don't roll out 1 to check if Ultra is doing its job, then you can ignore critical hits. So between Ultra modifiers, when there is a convoy battle, you will check all of these pieces, they'll attack the convoy once, resulting in a number of hits. So now you know that your convoy has been weakened, but you do not know yet exactly how much. You will check that only at the end of the turn. So During the enemy phase, first you move, when there's a convoy, first you move pieces as usual, resolve this phase, resolve the enemy's attacks against the convoy, recording a number of hits, play the rest of the turn as normal, and at the end of the turn, that is when you look at this display and you look at the box for the convoy that you're trying to resolve to see how many supply points or military points sometimes actually make it. For each hit that you recorded there, in our example here, there are 3 hits. For each hit that you recorded there, you need to roll a die and check the corresponding section. Suppose that we have 3 hits against Operation Tiger, So the first hit is a 2, so no loss. We have 2 more to resolve. 6, that's pretty bad, because that means that that military point that was there has been lost. And then we have 1 more, and it's a 6 again. We ignore duplicates. So those 3 hits, 1 removed that resource, 1 wasn't nothing, and 1 was a duplicate, which also is a nothing. That means after we remove that one, what is left is 1 supply point, and we gain that one. So the convoys can act very differently. They can be of different size. There's more at stake or less size. If at least 1 piece, at least 1 supply point made it through, well, first, good for you. You get those supply points or those military points. If something made it through, you get a bonus action to represent the boost in morale. If nothing good comes out of the convoy because every possible supply has been destroyed there, then you lose a morale in the process. So this is the general idea. I know it sounds super complicated, but on the plus side, and there's still more things, mini procedures, modifiers. I haven't told you about the Spitfires, about Cunningham, about other things, about fortifying. But this is the general idea. And again, on the plus side, really, you don't have to understand everything to start playing the game. You just breeze through the rules and start playing, and as things apply, because you're drawing cards, then you will just go and reread the corresponding sections. But in essence, that's how you play. This is how you play Malta Besiege. Protect Malta, push the Axis as far as you can from Cairo, and then, well, continue to play until you win or lose, and that will determine, I guess, how the game went. This is good. This is a really good game. It is definitely one of my favorite games in the State of Siege system. It is also definitely one on the more complex side of the spectrum, but that's fine, no problem there. Ultimately, State of Siege is a system that relies on an incredibly simple concept, which is you flip a card that will move enemy pieces towards an area you want to protect, that will cause other game effects, and then you have actions that you can spend to do variants of the idea of rolling higher than a certain number. So you do need some more meat in there and something more to spice things up. And so successful games in the system create precisely a balance or a productive tension between the simplicity of that idea and enough ways of implementing, embodying that idea, that then you have decisions, then you have things to do. And again, also what makes these games successful is when you have more things to do than you can possibly achieve, and so you're always there budgeting resources and try to just stay afloat as the situation becomes increasingly desperate. Now here, if you play the historical game, because of the way things played out historically, it's not such a linear thing. It's not like a progressive worsening of your situation. Things start pretty calm early on. There's only the Italians there doing their things. They're not too dangerous. But also things are calmer in the sense that in the early epoch, you tend to have around 2 actions per turn. Later, the average action seems to be 3. So it's not just that the things ramp up, but also you have more things to do. but then more enemies arrive, but then there are also literally more actions that become available to you, such as raiding the enemy lines. So I like the fact that the game doesn't make you do the same thing over and over again, which again is a risk with the system, because the script by itself, flip a card, move some pieces, roll some dice, the script is the same. But with more actions being unlocked as you go, more things to do, with the mini game of the convoy, the punctuate things, then the game really keeps things fresh. You do have the sense of an overall narrative. And again, things start easy, they ramp up a little bit around the second half of the second epoch. Things become pretty desperate, but then you start having some help coming from different directions. If you play the historical game, you know that at the end there will be good stuff waiting for you. So it's kind of different from, like, oh, it ramps up until you're fighting the final big boss, because help has come, and so there will be certain retreats that will happen of enemy pieces. You can count on those. Again, if that becomes too scripted for you, then shuffle those cards and play the random game. Or also, if you really like, if you don't like so much the idea that some of the later cards are easier than some of the earlier ones. But that's not the part for me, because one reason why I play games such as this one is to explore history, is to enjoy history, to see it from the point of view of a decision maker, and who is experiencing some of those dilemmas and gets to see some of the consequences. And I play the game in both versions, the random version, so to speak, with the shuffle deck, and the historical version, and I like both. And again, I like how many things you have to do, and how just not enough resources you have to do. Of course, there's a random element here. The number of times that I rolled a 1 checking for Ultra, consistently that I rolled a 1 checking for Ultra, is just mind-blowing, that then I have to spend actions to do that. But also, Romulus has rolled for 1 when trying to go past a fortification a certain number of times. Maybe just the die that rolls a lot of 1s. I don't know. But there is an element, of course, there that is random. But at the same time, you're gonna roll dice so many times, draw cards so many times. It's one of those, bell things. So sooner or later, something particularly unlucky or something particularly lucky will happen, and extreme results will tend to even each other out, and so things will still tend to fall towards the middle. But then there will be cases. I lost a game like after a couple of turns, like maybe 5 or 6 turns, just because every resource was down at 0. I was spending actions doing other things. Every time I tried to get those actions, I was failing to increase my resource. I was failing to. That happens, and then I reset the game and I play again. And that time, actually, the following game, I had a pretty good victory in which I kicked Rommel out of North Africa and Italy at the end of the game. So it goes away, but we play war games because, again, we want to experience the fog of war, the chaos of the battlefield, the uncertainties of warfare. Otherwise, we'll be playing chess. And so I know that many war gamers are perfectly cool with a considerable element of randomness. I know I am. So Malta Besieged, you have a lot of theme, you have a lot of chrome, both from the point of view of the content that is there, and also the procedures that allow you to really see these things come alive and do different things. And again, what I gave you is just an overview. There are other procedures, deciding whether you want to use Cunningham, when you want to use him, that's important, when you want to build fortifications, how you're going to use your Spitfires when you get them later on. So I really like how the game tells you the story of the fight for the Mediterranean in World War II in a way that is thematically rich and is mirrored by a lot of interesting game procedures and game functions that, yeah, it takes a while to get to really grok them. But once you get them, then they will result in a very nice, very engaging tree of decisions. So I like the space of decision that the game gives to the player. I like the story that it tells. So definitely, I'm very happy. I'm very pleased with Malta Besieged, 1940-1942. It does what I like the most in State of Siege games, in the best ones especially, which is to give me an incredibly simple game engine and a lot of history and a lot of Chrome that comes to life around that. And I think this game is very, very successful in doing precisely so.